On an autumn evening in 1984, a guttural voice hissed through the phone. "I have taken my revenge. I have taken the boy." 2 hours later, 4-year-old Grégory Villemin was hauled from the Vologne, hands and feet bound, wool hat slipping over silent eyes. 40 years, a family feud, and a national obsession later, that voice still haunts French justice. Tonight, we unmask the lethal blend of envy, error, and cold case science that keeps a child locked in the river's icy grip.
Welcome to CrimeByte.
In this channel, we peel back the layers of those hidden realities, raw evidence, conflicting testimonies, and emotional pleas for help that too often come too late. By looking into these crime bites, you'll see firsthand how broken trust, systemic oversights, and chilling motives can converge into stories that rattle us to the core. If you find this exploration as vital as we do, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notifications button. Together, we can shine a light on the cases that demand attention, ensuring every voice, especially the silenced, finds the audience it deserves. For nearly a year before the murder, an anonymous tormentor, self-styled Le Corbeau, the Crow, rang the Villemin home in the hill village of Leponge-sur-Vologne with guttural curses that crackled down the line. When the family changed numbers, letters began, pages of obsessive envy, ridiculing 4-year-old Gregory's toddler lisp, promising revenge for what Jean-Marie has done. The young father, foreman at the nearby eau de Cussin factory, seemed mystified. Who among the sprawling, tight-knit clan resented his recent promotion and the split-level house he'd built opposite the sawmill? Police traced no fingerprints, no salivary DNA on the envelopes. Graphologists mapped looping strokes to half a dozen relatives, each test contradicting the last. The Crow's callbox voice became a grim soundtrack of Vosges evenings, yet no one guessed how close the predator perched. On Tuesday, 16th of October 1984, Gregory toddled outside at 5:05 p.m. to play with his new red dump truck. His mother, Christine, swirled cocoa on the stove, glancing out every few seconds. In that tiny window, the Crow struck. At 5:30, the phone rang in the kitchen. A chilling hiss slithered through. "I have taken my revenge. I have taken the boy." Christine's scream jolted the village. Search parties fanned along the riverbanks as dusk congealed into fog. At 9 p.m., gendarmes found the child's body in the icy Vologne. His hands and feet were bound with thick builder's cord. A woolen hat had slipped over round eyes that once dazzled everyone he met. He'd been tossed from the overhanging Pré du Moulin bridge, 4 kilometers upstream from home. What kind of hatred burns so hot that it weaponizes a toddler to scorch an entire family line? Within 48 hours, investigators zeroed on Bernard Laroche, Jean-Marie's 29-year-old cousin and once close friend. Handwriting experts claimed his slanted G and looped Y matched the Crow's letters. But the linchpin was Muriel Boll, Laroche's 15-year-old sister-in-law. Under hours of interrogation, she sobbed that Bernard had driven her in his beige Peugeot to pick up Gregory that fatal afternoon. The statement read like a confession by proxy. Laroche was arrested 5th of November 1984. Cameras flashed as he was led in iron bracelets past a screaming crowd. Within days, solidarity banners sprouted across the Vosges, some vilifying him, others insisting on his innocence. The case ruptured the family tree into feuding branches. Then, in February 1985, Muriel Boll recanted publicly, claiming gendarmes threatened her. Without her testimony, the handwriting analysis looked suddenly fragile. Laroche walked free. Rage festered in Jean-Marie's chest until 29th of March 1985, when he ambushed Laroche outside his house and fired a slug from a hunting rifle into his heart. The foreman, whose steady hands once guided factory looms, now gripped a prison door. He served 2.5 years for manslaughter. Justice for his son remained as murky as the Vologne. When grief twists into vigilantism, does it avenge the victim or bury the truth beneath fresh blood? By summer 1985, a new theory captivated prosecutor Jean-Pierre Mondin. The Crow was none other than the grieving mother herself, Christine Villemin. 2 fresh graphology reports pointed at her delicate cursive. A neighbor swore she saw Christine drive toward the Vologne that evening, though timestamps later exposed impossible logistics. The press, starving for novelty, pounced. 7 months pregnant, Christine was arrested on the 5th of July 1985 as gendarmes lifted her knitting needles from trembling hands. Her cell smelled of bleach and mildew. Journalists camped outside the grey Remiremont jail, painting her alternately as Medea or persecuted Madonna. Yet the case against her hinged on overlapping graphologists and speculative psychology. A mother jealous of her son's affection for his father, prosecutors hinted. In February 1986, an appeals court released her, scathing in its critique of fragile handwriting evidence and false eyewitness memories. She was formally exonerated in 1993. Still, the smear lingered. Supermarket whispers followed her well into the 2000s. When investigative floodlights pivot from cousin to mother to great-uncle, does each rotation illuminate the path to truth, or blind everyone in its glare? Christine's release left Vosges investigators with a corpse, contradictory handwriting reports, and a widening chasm of family hostility. By 1987, the task force had logged 6,000 tips, compared 400 voice samples to the crow's hoarse calls, and still lacked a prosecutable theory. One detective likened the dossier to a snake eating its own tail. Every new lead bites an old one. The media frenzy stoked that Ouroboros. TV anchors ran primetime reenactments complete with a child mannequin tossed from a replica bridge. Tabloids printed side-by-side photos of grieving relatives under lurid headers, which Villemin lies best, prompting libel suits that further polarized the clan. Meanwhile, Jean-Marie, paroled, rebuilt engines in an auto shop, headphones blasting to drown static in his mind, where the crow still cackled. In 1993, a Paris appeals court formally pronounced Christine innocent. Yet tape cassettes of anonymous calls still haunted evidence lockers. No technology of the era could isolate DNA from the saliva moistening envelope flaps. The file slid into limbo, passed between magistrates like a cursed heirloom. When the river of leads freezes, does truth hibernate or suffocate beneath the ice of procedural stalemate? Turn of the millennium, forensic labs promised miracles, and Gregory's case was first in line. In 2000, investigators shipped the killer's rope, clothing fibers, and 54 letters to Paris's Pasteur Institute for mitochondrial analysis. Hope soared, only to crash when mold and bleach degradation rendered profiles unreadable. Undeterred, Magistrate Catherine Chambon greenlit another sweep in 2008. This time, scientists tried low copy number amplification, prying alleles from dust motes. They produced a partial male DNA trace on one stamp, but contamination from decades of handling could not be ruled out. A 2013 retest on the same sample yielded a different profile entirely, proving just how fickle degraded evidence can be. Each failure chipped at public faith in crime scene magic. Meanwhile, new letter sequencing software suggested the crow's syntax shifted mid-1984, implying more than one author. Graphologists clashed like rival prophets. Some saw Laroche's broad loops, others Christine's pointed serifs, still others an amalgam, collaborative hatred. The file ballooned past 12,000 pages, as heavy as the marble angel now guarding Gregory's grave. When science offers one more revolver spin at Russian roulette, do investigators pull the trigger, or fear another misfire will doom the case forever? On the 14th of June 2017, digital forensics team Cell ID re-examined call detail records. Cross-referencing tower logs with rural payphones, they mapped the crow's calls to circuits near Marcel and Jacqueline Jacob, Gregory's great-uncle and great-aunt, Laroche's parents. Magistrates ordered simultaneous arrests, the elderly couple in Arches, and once again, Muriel Boll, now 48, living quietly as a bus driver. The accusations drew on a new psychological theory, collective persecution, alleging the Jacobs envied Jean-Marie's financial ascent and orchestrated a family conspiracy. Prosecutors cited Boll's 1984 statement, before her recantation, as the purest version, unaffected by lawyers. Handwriting algorithms flagged Jacqueline's letter forms as a 93% match to the later Crow notes. Yet within days, the arrests crumbled. Voicemail tape molds had decayed, preventing voice comparison. Boll's lawyers produced expert testimony that adolescent memories under coercion are inherently unreliable. Judges released all three without charges. The public, whipped into expectation, exhaled disappointment so loud it seemed to bend Vosges' pines. Tragically, Jean-Michel Lambert, the original 1984 examining magistrate long criticized for procedural errors, committed suicide 2 weeks later. His note reportedly read, I hear the river every night. If every fresh arrest becomes another mirage, at what point does the investigative desert claim its last weary traveler? Legal scholars now cite l'affaire Grégory as a living syllabus on institutional blind spots, confirmation bias, media contamination, and the tug-of-war between local gendarmes and Paris power brokers. In 1985, judges leaned on graphology as though it were hard science. Competing experts produced dueling matches, each brandishing magnified letters that seemed to shift identity under every new interpretation. Her questioning, conducted without a lawyer, parent, or psychologist, later became Exhibit A in the textbook on coerced juvenile testimony. Protocols to protect minors simply didn't exist yet, and her words bent beneath the weight of adult expectations. For decades, the child's clothing, letters, and rope were stored in fluctuating temperatures that slowly stripped away the DNA detectives would one day need. Every drip and draft eroded tomorrow's technology before tomorrow could arrive. A parliamentary working group eventually drafted the so-called Grégory Guidelines, calling for digital chain of custody logs, climate-controlled evidence rooms, and mandatory legal safeguards for young witnesses. Regional courts embraced parts of the playbook, but critics argue reform is a salve applied 3 decades too late for the boy whose tiny sneakers once skittered across Leponge's driveways. Can legislative stitches close a wound left festering for decades, or does the scar itself reshape the body politic? Enter next-generation whole genome capture. In 2022, French biotech startup MiroPDX partnered with Interpol to test an experimental airflow lysis method that vaporizes microcells without damaging survivor DNA. Prosecutor Claire Barbier secured rare judicial permission to sacrifice a 3mm square of the killer's rope. 48 hours later, analysts produced a 1.2 million single nucleotide profile, too degraded for CODIS, but sufficient for genealogical triangulation. Data pointed to a Y chromosome cluster centered on a village barely 15 kilometers from Leponge's. Among living males in that haplogroup, 2 remaining Jacob cousins and a now-deceased sawmill worker who had access to the Otto Kusen factory parking lot in 1984, investigators prepared exhumation requests and covert DNA collection from coffee cups. The media, burned by previous false dawns, reported cautiously. But inside the courthouse, whispers circulated, "We might actually have him." When technology finally prees open destiny's rusted lock, will the door reveal justice or unleash another storm of doubt? Driven by the new genetic lead, a forensic hydrology team remodeled the Vologne's 1984 flow using rainfall archives and LiDAR topography. They pinpointed eddy zones where heavier objects snagged, perfect for trapping rope fragments or a culprit's dropped tool. A week-long dive recovered 2 corroded steel shackles, stamped with a sawmill logo, matching the exhumed worker's employer. Metallurgists dated oxidation to circa mid-1980s. Meanwhile, genealogists identified a direct descendant willing to donate DNA. Preliminary comparison showed 0 match to the rope profile. The exhumation, however, is set for June 2025, pending family consent. France holds its breath, dividing once again into camps. It ends here versus, haven't we heard this song? Jean-Marie attends the river search, white-haired, silent. A reporter dares ask what justice would look like now. He replies, "Justice was buried with my boy. We only decide how deep. If the river finally spits out the last rusty proof, can any verdict equal 4 decades of sorrow?" Grégory Villemin would be 45 this year, perhaps coaching youth football, steering his own children away from the river's slippery banks. Instead, his short life unfurled an epic tragedy that placed a microscope over French policing, media ethics, and the fragility of forensic aspiration. Whatever the outcome of the 2025 exhumation and the nanopore profile, one truth endures: a chain of small failures. Delayed arrests, coerced testimony, evidence stored like attic junk can magnify into national trauma. Conversely, a mosaic of small persistences, parents refusing silence, scientists refining assays, citizens still calling tip lines, can keep possibility alive long after probability dims. When the last test tube empties and the courtroom lights go dark, will France remember Grégory as a lesson learned or a wound unhealed? And which memory holds the power to protect the next child who wanders too near a river's edge? Somewhere between an anonymous letter, a dangling telephone cord, and a riverside crevice lies the truth of what happened to little Grégory. Every DNA breakthrough, every digitized court file, every witness who finally steps forward edges us closer to letting that river speak. If you know anything about a rope bought in '84, a letter's looped handwriting, a family secret whispered over coffee, it's time to talk. Comment below with responsible insights or tips. Your fragment could complete the puzzle. Like, subscribe, and smash the notification bell so you never miss the moment justice finally echoes through the Vosges. Until the Vologne releases every secret it holds, we'll keep the current moving.